Welcome to American Krishna. I'm Cyril War. Been practicing what's called Krishna consciousness for the last 30 years or so. On these lives, we go directly into the main text that I often quote in my regular videos, namely the Bhagavad-Gita. For those of you who are not familiar with the Bhagavad-Gita, it is considered to be the most important scripture of the corpus of ancient literatures found in ancient India, written in Sanskrit. The word Vedas or Vedic wisdom is apropos in this context. The word Veda literally means knowledge in Sanskrit. You've probably heard of things like Ayurveda, Ayurvedic medicine. So Veda refers again to this corpus of sacred texts from thousands of years ago in India, of which the Bhagavad-Gita, the Song of God, or the Song of God, literally translated, is considered to be the most famous and the essence of it all. We're starting to read right now, today, a particular edition of the Bhagavad-Gita by Dr. Howard Resnick, also known as Hridayananda Das Goswami. He has a Ph.D. from the University of Harvard University, and he got his Ph.D. in Sanskrit studies faster than anyone in the history of the Department of Sanskrit at Harvard University. He's a direct disciple or initiated disciple of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement. He met Prabhupada in the 1960s, and Prabhupada sent him to South America to be one of the pioneers of Krishna consciousness in South America, among so many other accolades. So a few years ago, he wrote a really beautiful book called The Comprehensive Guide to the Bhagavad Gita with literal translation. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually go through this book gradually, starting today. And whenever, as you can see, the author makes references to different verses in parentheses, we'll actually go there and actually see what Lord Krishna has to say. The Bhagavad Gita really is considered the essence of the Vedic literatures, and it is self-declared as the king of all knowledge. And so the idea is that by hearing this wisdom recited by whoever, me in this case, and by reciting this wisdom, then both the speaker and the hearer get spiritual benefit. We get reconnected to our source, to Krishna himself, just by hearing this. So pay attention. If you're driving or if you're cooking or if you're just looking at the screen, the point is to pay attention, because this is not my words. Who cares about me? It's all about Krishna and his wonderful teachings to us, so that we can be happy and spiritually fulfilled in this life. I have to plug in my battery, otherwise it's going to go dead. So let's start. We'll start with this typical invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, which is a mantra that offers respects to what's considered to be the literary avatar, or the literary incarnation of Vishnu or Krishna or God, namely Vyasadeva, who allegedly compiled all the Vedic literatures. So here we go. The introduction. The author, Dr. Resnick, Hridayananda Goswami, writes, "The words Bhagavad Gita literally mean the Lord's song, and today 1 billion people around the world accept it as such. This elegant, ancient text addresses life's big issues. Who am I? What is the universe? How can I be happy? Where does it all come from? Where is it all going? Who are real teachers, and how do we recognize them? The Gita, as it is often called, excels in its calm, reasonable, satisfying responses to these perennial questions." A brief Sanskrit work of several hundred verses, Bhagavad-Gita forms part of the Bhishma Parva, the 6th book of Mahabharata, a vast sacred history. Now, the Mahabharata, you may know, is like the equivalent of the Odyssey or the Iliad of the ancient Greeks. And we're just waiting for someone like Steven Spielberg or whoever to make a movie out of it, because boy, is there material in there for an amazing cinematic experience. So back to the text here. The Gita shines as the spiritual beacon and summit of that far larger work, namely the Mahabharata, which for untold centuries has played a central cultural role in South Asia and beyond. Originally, this comprehensive guide to the Gita's content was intended to be only a short introduction to my literal Gita translation, but like Krishna's fabled fish incarnation, which appeared in tiny form and then grew to vast proportions, what began as a mere introduction grew by necessity to become a book in itself. Now, here the author is making reference to Krishna's fabled fish incarnation. This is, in the tradition of the Bhagavad-Gita, you have this belief that God has many forms, right? It's polymorphic monotheism, or polymorphic bimonotheism, if you want to be specific, because, we worship Radha, Krishna, or God and his divine consort, or his feminine counterpart. So, but it's polymorphic nonetheless. So therefore you have this notion of avatar, the avatar theory, God coming in different forms, keeping his original identity, his original form, and yet transforming that form into different shapes according to his own transcendental will, and those forms keeping that same identity in terms of personality. That's why, for example, Prabhupada used this term, a supreme personality of Godhead, right? When Prabhupada was talking about Krishna or Vishnu or God, he coined this term, supreme personality of Godhead. So the term personality is important. God has an original personality, an infinite personality, but a personality nonetheless. And if he wishes, he can appear, in different transcendental forms, of which one is the fish avatar. The fish avatar, which is described in the Bhagavad Purana or the Srimad Bhagavatam, I forgot what canto. So anyway, coming back to the author here. But like Krishna's fabled incarnation, which appeared in tiny form, this book grew in itself. So what happened, if you actually listen to the story, this fish incarnation started really small and then grew really, 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 really big, right? So that's why the author here, Dr. Resnick, is referring to it. Having read, studied, and cherished the Gita for decades at the feet of my teacher, Srila Prabhupada, so as we said, the author is, Hridaya Maharaj was is still alive, and that's really cool, a direct disciple of Prabhupada. So having cherished the Gita for decades at the feet of my teacher, Prabhupada, I could not help but share the profound conceptual connections that make this Sanskrit text so magical. The Gita is widely recognized as a work of spiritual and philosophical genius, and early on I fell in love with its Sanskrit text. My sincere wish here, through explication and translation, is to bring the general reader deep within that original Sanskrit. I hope you enjoy the journey. And here's a little footnote here. A note to my readers, italics are used throughout the Gita. Okay. Historical context. So this is cool now. We're going to get into the history. For those of you who are here for the first time, you're going to get a historical context in which this famous text is situated. Bhagavad-Gita opens on a battlefield moments before justice and injustice, or dharma and adharma, personified by Pandava and Kuru warriors, burst into war. So these two words are really important, dharma and adharma. You could write a Ph.D. about just the word dharma. And when you have a little letter a before the word, it negates what comes after, right? So adharma means non-dharma, or the opposite of what comes after. So for example, himsa means violence. So ahimsa, a pretty famous word, means non-violence. So adharma means non-dharma, or in other words, just injustice, right? If you're gonna translate the word dharma into justice, then adharma would be injustice. A little footnote. The Gita's first chapter, arcane to most with its long list of warrior names, is thrilling to one who knows all the Mahabharata history that came before. So the author, Hridayananda, he knows that that Mahabharata just like unbelievably well. So for him, it's like, as a matter of fact, there's another book, I might as well pitch it here. If you go on Amazon, you'll find it's called Great Bharata, Volume 1 out of a 6-volume series that's coming out gradually. Basically a Mahabharata told in modern language. So back to what Dr. Resnick's saying here. Krishna drives the chariot of Arjuna, his close friend and cousin, who fights for right? But just as the battle is about to begin, Arjuna falls into confusion, claiming compassion for cruel usurpers with whom he shares family bonds. He refuses to fight for justice. Arjuna recognizes this emotion as weakness, yet it paralyzes him. And here's a little footnote. Okay, so here we have the first reference. 2:7, right? So let's go to the actual verse. At 2:7, Arjuna says, "Mistaken pity has weakened my nature. Baffled about duty, I ask you, what would be the certain good? Tell me, I am your disciple. Teach me, for I am surrendered to you." Super important verse, right? Because this is the verse where Arjuna is setting the standard of how a student should behave towards his teacher, right? I am your disciple. I'm surrendered to you. Please teach me. Please teach me, right? Mistaken pity has weakened my nature. He's on the battlefield. Baffled about duty, I ask you, what would be the certain good? Like, tell me what to do. What am I supposed to do here? Tell me, I am your disciple. Teach me, for I am surrendered unto you. And what's really cool is, like, you can see Arjuna, he's not really saying, like, what should I do for myself? He's saying, like, what's the certain good? What's the right thing to do? I don't know if you know of Spike Lee. Spike Lee is it's not so famous anymore, but he was like a big African-American filmmaker in the early 90s. Late 80s, and there was this one movie he made or produced or filmed called Do the Right Thing, right? So this is sort of what Arjuna was asking him. Like, I ask you, what would be the certain good? Like, what's the right thing to do, right? Okay, so back to Hridayananda. He cannot act. Arjuna cannot act. After trying to defend his retreat with socio-moral arguments and pleas, Arjuna nearly collapses in anxiety, and here ends the Gita's first chapter. In chapter 2, Krishna begins to revive, teach, and enlighten Arjuna, insisting on moral, social, and spiritual grounds that Arjuna should indeed fight, right? And that's the whole point. Like, Arjuna doesn't want to fight. By the end of the Bhagavad-Gita, he picks up his bow and says, okay, I'll fight, right? Some readers question the spirituality of Krishna urging Arjuna to battle. Like, right, I remember when I was 20 years old and I was just starting to read the Bhagavad-Gita, and I shared it with a friend in Paris at the time, Jérôme Castignaro. And so I shared it with him, and then the next day or a few days later, he comes to my room in my apartment, and he was like, "Hey man, like, what's up? What's the difference between this book, right, where God, supposedly Krishna, is telling Arjuna to fight and kill, and the Muslim terrorists who, in the name of Allah, claiming Allahu Akbar, perform terrorist acts on the strength of the same argument? Isn't it the same argument? God told me to do it." And to tell you honestly, I was like, I don't know what to say. He had me cornered. And he still sort of does, but not really. I think there's serious considerations to be unpacked. But let's hear it. Let's hear Hridayananda here. To understand what is going on, we must turn to the Gita's historical setting within this epic Mahabharata. And that's something, I didn't know. I didn't know about the context of the Mahabharata, so I couldn't answer my friend Jérôme. Imagine you awake one day to shocking news. Usurpers have seized your government, suspended the constitution, driven out legitimate rulers, and violently imposed martial law. right? That's what basically, that was the context. That was the context, supposedly, at the time of the Mahabharata war and at the time of Krishna speaking the Bhagavad-Gita. You pray that the legitimate government, the military, and all loyal citizens will oppose the aggressors and restore the rule of law and tradition. Mahabharata teaches that a similar crisis erupted in India thousands of years ago. Right? Krishna, God, came to earth to help his devotees, Arjuna, his brothers, and others, to restore Dharma. So this is a huge point right here. As a matter of fact, Krishna says this as such. Let's see if the author is going to actually, Sridhar Maharaj quotes those two very famous verses, 4.7 and 4.8. So let's finish this. So Krishna, God, came to earth to help his devotees. I mean, that's a huge claim. You know, the Bhagavad Gita claims that God himself, right, the Supreme Father, right, the Father that art in heaven, who, you know, for Christians, you know, sent Jesus or incarnated as Christ, came down to earth as well. So it's not only that, you know, Christ came down to earth. The Father himself came down to earth in the according to the Bhagavad Gita's version, which is, you know, really a far out claim to make, right? So God came to earth to help his devotees to restore Dharma on earth. Thus, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna urges Arjuna to oppose the Kurus, led by Duryodhana, who unjustly usurped power. Krishna states that he expressly comes to earth to restore Dharma. And here we see him in action. So here we go. So here are the super, super famous verses, chapter 4, verse 7 and 8. Ready for them? Here we go. In chapter 4, verse 7, Krishna says, Bharata, in other words, another name for Arjuna, whenever Dharma weakens and adharma surges, I then manifest myself to deliver the righteous, destroy the wicked, and restore Dharma. I appear in every age. Right? Super famous verses. Right? Yada yada hi dharmasya, right? Whenever dharma is weak and adharma or injustice, right, or unrighteousness starts rising, then I come down or I manifest myself. To do what? To deliver the righteous, destroy the wicked, and restore dharma, right? Super famous verse. So let's go back to what Sridhar Maharaj says. Legitimate rulers expect their generals to defend the law. So Krishna expected Arjuna to fight at Kurukshetra rather than allow rule by fraud, coercion, and usurpation. The events of this... Sorry, I got something right in front of here that I have to clear. The events... I apologize. The events of this sacred history occur on 3 levels. This is really cool. This is where I think Sridhar Maharaj makes this brilliant point that I haven't heard anybody else make. You know, how the Bhagavad Gita is basically happening on 3 different levels. So let's read it. The events of this sacred history occur on 3 levels: earthly, cosmic, and spiritual. Right. So the Bhagavad Gita, you can actually look at it. You can look at this conflict in terms of earth, cosmic, and spiritual. So earthly, we briefly spoke of this above, right? There's these 2 armies, there's 2 families. I mean, one family that's 2 fratricidal components of one big family, and they're fighting with each other for control. Okay. Cosmic. The teachings of Bhagavad Gita and the encompassing history of Mahabharata unfold within a personal, multi-layered cosmos of upper, middle, and lower worlds. In other words, here we're kind of touching on this notion of Vedic cosmology. In other words, according to the Vedic cosmology, according to Vedic cosmology, in other words, according to the description of the universe or the universes the material manifestation, as described in the Vedic literatures, specifically in this case, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the fifth canto of the Bhagavatam, of which I'm not at all an expert, but at least we get the basic idea, at least I do, or most of us can if we just read it. There's this idea that life is not just on planet Earth. There's basically 3 planetary systems in this universe: the higher planetary system, the middle planetary system, and the lower planetary system. And planet Earth happens to be situated in the middle planetary system. So let's continue to see what Dr. Resnick or Hridayan Anamarj says. So there's this personal multi-layered cosmos, right? And why is it personal? Because first of all, it's created by a personal God, and it's filled with individual souls. And according to the Bhagavad-Gita, as we'll see, we're all individual souls. So we're all personal. We're all persons, right? And hence, kudos to the doctrine of personalism, which exists in Christianity, and like there's a lot of books on philosophy of religion, specifically on the topic of personalism, that have been written. So that's why the word personal. So a personal, multi-layered cosmos of upper, middle, and lower worlds. We saw that. Justice and injustice, or dharma and adharma, contend in higher worlds as they do on earth. On the Kurukshetra battlefield, where Krishna speaks Bhagavad-Gita, the Kurus, Pandavas, and all other leading warriors fought as empowered incarnations of cosmic heroes and villains. So here we have this notion of devas and asuras. Earth had become a battleground for a cosmic struggle. Super important, devas and asuras. And here, we can draw a parallel with Christian eschatology. Christians often speak of the power of good and evil in the universe, right? There's God and Christ and the angels, and then there's, it's Satan or the devil and the dark forces, and there's this constant power struggle going on between the forces of evil, led by Satan, and the forces of light led by Christ or God, right? So in a similar sense, in the Vedic literatures, or according to Vedic cosmology, you have this idea that there's a supreme God above everything, Krishna or Vishnu, and then you have a certain type of being. You have souls who have a certain tendency, at least right now in their incarnated existence, because we can change. We can go from being a demon to a god, or from a god to being a demon. So because we always have free will, and so it's not like we're cursed to be demoniac forever, for example. And we can be saintly and yet make the wrong decision. So there's basically the devas and the asuras. So kind of like the light and darkness. The devas refers to gods and goddesses. In other words, this is a monotheistic paradigm with one supreme lord above it all. But imagine that God is like an emperor, and in the court of an emperor you have ministers and heads of different departments. So in a similar way, according to the Vedic paradigm, you have a supreme being above it all who is omniscient, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, all the attributes of the supreme person, and he delegates different responsibilities of universal maintenance to different gods and goddesses. And so here we kind of see a similar thing in like the Greek gods and goddesses, and therefore you have this idea of the devas, the gods with not a capital G, but with a small g, So for example, specifically in this particular tradition, you have Krishna or Vishnu at the top, and then you may have, even Shiva or Ganesh or Sarasvati, or, so many different gods with a small g, and they're called in Sanskrit devas. And then asuras, again, the word a before the word, the word that comes after, right? So sura means pious or godly. Asura means, demoniac, or the opposite of godly. So you have the suras and the asuras, or the devas and the asuras, right? The power of light and the power of darkness, or the agents of light and the agents of darkness fighting on a cosmic level, right? And so similarly, in the Vedic system, you have this idea that, there's a constant struggle, a power struggle between, the gods and goddesses with, the Supreme Lord above them and on their team, and the demons, those souls who have rejected God and who don't want to serve God and be subservient to God. And, and here we can talk about shapeshifters and how, some of these demons can actually incarnate as human beings on planet Earth, and, but they actually come from lower regions of the universe. And therefore you can also make a connection to the whole UFO literature. And it's a big topic, but it's an important point to make. This universe, there's this cosmic battle between the Devas and the Asuras, right? And at the time of the Mahabharata, Earth had become a battleground for a cosmic struggle. And 3, finally, and we'll stop with this, a spiritual battle. When Krishna, God, descends to this world, he designs his deeds, such as speaking Bhagavad-Gita, to awaken sleeping souls to their eternal blissful nature and ecstatic relationship with him. The entire history that frames the Gita is a planned spiritual drama wherein Krishna saves the virtuous, removes the wicked, and restores Dharma, the sacred law that sustains the universe. In other words, ultimately, Krishna wants to save souls, right? The material world, where there's some pious souls, such as the Devas, and where there's also demoniac souls, such as the Asuras. I mean, a soul is always transcendental. It's just their conditioning, right? Due to their own decisions over many lifetimes. Krishna wants to save us all. So he descends into this world to, particularly save the virtuous, right? Or to save those souls who agree to take shelter of him. And hence, at the end of the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna declares one of his most important instruction to humanity, namely, sarva dharman parityajya mamekam, abandon all varieties of religion, or, abandon all forms of dharma and take shelter of me alone. Let's just go see it, actually. It's 1866, and at 1866, right at the end of chapter 18, Krishna says in this very famous verse at 1866, giving up all dharmas, right? Giving up all dharmas, come to me alone for shelter. I shall free you from all evils. Do not worry. Giving up all dharmas, come to me alone for shelter, right? And then he's like, don't worry, bro. I'll free you from all evils. Or I'll free you from all sinful reactions. This is how Prabhupada translated the verse. Prabhupada translated this verse as, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. And perhaps a more literal translation, not to say that it's better in any way, it's just perhaps more loyal to the Sanskrit, which, Hridayana Maharaj provides here, is giving up all dharmas, come to me alone for shelter. I shall free you from all evils. Do not worry. So that's kind of like, that's the final instruction of God. Like, take shelter of me, right? And that's why he comes to this world, to show that he's here, and then he's waiting for us in his eternal abode of what's called Vaikuntha or Goloka Vrindavan. And it's up to us now. It's up to us. And in Kali Yuga, we know we're both demon and demigod. We're 50% demon, 50% 50% angel, 50% demon. It's stated in this age that we live in, right? In Kali Yuga, we have the propensity to love and serve Krishna, and we have the propensity to reject him and to serve our own senses and act selfishly and exploit others and everything around us. So we have a choice. We have a choice to either to take up Krishna's call, giving up all dharma, come to me alone, right? For shelter, I'll free you from all evils, or to continue, deciding, no, I'm just gonna, stick around in my selfish ways in this material world. The choice is up to us. All right, tomorrow we'll continue with this introduction, or the day after. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to recite this wonderful text and get purified and more qualified. And I hope, and I'm confident that if you heard this, not because it's me, but because it's Krishna's teachings, you benefited as well. Take care. Talk to you soon. Hare Krishna. Thank you.